All right, so in this video, we are going to address audiovisual components of the meetings and events. So we have different types of AV equipment. The first one we're going to talk about is our sound systems. And so our sound systems are any kind of things that have amplifiers. We use microphones. We have different types of microphones. So a lavalier is one where the speaker is going to be clipped, a microphone maybe to their lapel or their shirt as they're speaking, and then the receiver is tucked into their pocket. We also have a standing mic or a roving mic that can be moved around. We also have cordless and wireless microphones. And then we have one that's simply attached to a table or into a podium. And so the more types of microphones we have, the presence of a mixer board is needed so that you can switch between the different microphones and control the different types of microphones. As far as lighting is concerned, we have a lot of different types of lighting when it comes to the specific uses. So profile spots is primarily something that's going to be used to accent somebody or something. The follow spots are going to be primarily those ones that you see where the spotlight moves from place to place, so it's not stagnant. The floodlights typically are used to provide lighting for backdrops and for things rather than people. We have special effects lighting like laser lighting, we have strobe lighting, different types of those types of lighting that will kind of enhance the experience and maybe add to the overall presentation. Intelligent lighting is through the use of computers, and so you can get a lot more sophisticated with the intelligent lighting. And then the last one is uplights, and so uplighting is those lights that are on the ground that shine up, and so typically they shine up in one direction, and they're used to accent. They can be LED. Typically those are LEDs, and so they can be a specific color, or they can change colors if they're connected to some kind of a computer system that can change that. And so all of these different types of lighting are going to help enhance the overall production. And how sophisticated the lighting is determines what type of service is going to be needed and the type of professional that's going to be needed to implement those. The other thing as far as AV equipment is our projection screens. We have three types of projection screens. We have a fast fold, which is essentially just a frame that the screen snaps into place. A tripod, where it is based on, it's held onto it by a tripod, and then it's really movable. Then the wall and the ceiling, so one that's attached to a wall or drops down from the ceiling. As far as this 5 feet rule, a 2x8 rule, this basically says that no person should be seated closer than 5 feet to a screen. Okay, and then this 2x8 rule says that nobody should be seated as close to the stage as 2 times the height of the screen, and they shouldn't be seated further away than 8 times the height of the screen. And so in this case, let's say we have a 10-foot screen. Following this rule, then nobody should be set closer than 20 feet to the screen and 80 feet away from the screen. So it's important that we understand this concept and we implement it as needed as we're able. I know sometimes we have a tendency to try to cram as many people as possible into a room to make it fit, but we want to, when possible, make sure that we're following this rule so everybody can have adequate views of the screen. So here's a chart. You can see the screen height is 6 feet by 8 feet, and so the farthest would be 48 and the closest would be 12. That kind of shows the following using that 2 by 8 rule. So here we have our screen that is mounted to the ceiling or the wall that drops down. And then these are examples of our fast fold screens. And so you can see it uses a frame, and then the screen just simply snaps onto place. And so the screen simply just folds up. And so with this, it's really easy to set these, not really easy, but relatively easy to set these up. These types of screens right here for the fast fold lend themselves to rear projection, which we'll talk about that in just a second. Okay. So as we consider different fast fold, either the ceiling mount or the tripod. So tripods are typically the least expensive, and they can be moved around, so that's good. But their largest size is only 8 feet, and so it makes it challenging to have them in spaces for larger people, larger groups. Whereas the fast fold, they have a variety of different sizes, so you can set the screen up based on the size of the audience that's needed. Something else we need to consider when we're thinking about screens is the angle which people are going to be viewing. So recommended 45 to 90 degrees from the screen is going to be recommended. If we need to go a little bit further, that would be acceptable between this range here, but really undesirable would be as people are looking at this really tight angle of the screen. And if we need to, we might need to consider putting a second screen or additional screens in so people will have the optimal views as they are working on looking at the screen and the presentation. So we also have different types of projectors, slide and overhead projectors. They're not really used that much anymore. The most common ones are the LCD projectors. This picture right here gives you an example of rear projection, and so these screens here, or these projectors here, are actually positioned behind the screen, and then they project the image onto the screen from behind. That's going to help alleviate anybody walking in front of a screen, in front of a projector, and having their shadow cast on the screen. The only issue with this is that it typically takes additional space to set them up from behind so that you can have the optimal projection up on the rear projection screen. And so that sometimes can cut into the space that you have available for tables and guests to sit. Multimedia presentations, they include a variety of different, not just PowerPoint presentations, but also they're going to include videos. And so with any kind of multimedia presentation, it's important to have a professional that's there managing that multimedia presentation. So that can sometimes add to the cost, but it also adds to the production value of the overall presentation. Different types of additional services that we have as far as AV, we might have simultaneous interpretation, meaning that if there's people that speak different languages, we might have, headsets, or we might have something available where people that will have translators on site that will be taking what the speaker is saying and translating it into the language that the other people need to hear. I see that a lot with sign language is really prevalent, but then we also have, you can also do it using different AV equipment to translate that in real time. With virtual conferencing, and then we'll talk about that in the next slide. Other projection devices, we have whiteboards, flip charts, pointers, or we have the little clickers that we can advance, and then different personal computers that we can also use. And so all of these things kind of come together to make the presentation really effective. When we're thinking about projecting any kind of videos or things like that, if it's not loaded onto a computer, we want to make sure that we have the appropriate bandwidth and the internet access to access those things so that it's not affected during the presentation time. So different types of virtual conferencing. Audio is just straight over the phone. We also have video satellite conferencing, so we'd be using the satellite communication. The basic, what a lot of people are doing nowadays is our web conferencing. And so that's going to be on a real-time meeting that's happening at the same time as the person is presenting, and so everyone's attending that. So web conferencing is becoming more and more popular. When we think about where we want to set the screen and the speaker, it's really important that the speaker and the podium does not block the view of the screen. So in this case here, this speaker and podium is blocking the view of all of these people. And so, it recommends that we have the screen set up kind of at a catty corner. Of course, this person is still not going to have like the most optimal view, but at least they'll be able to see the screen a little bit, and that won't be blocked by the view of the presenter. Same thing with the U-shaped. So again, we have the screen is either here or here, and then our projector and our person is right over here, so that way nobody is blocking their view. So here's what I was talking about before. This is our front projections. The projector is out front, and the screen is here. The issue is if anybody right here gets up, they will cast their shadow onto the screen. The rear projection is where the projector was actually behind the screen, like we saw in that previous picture. And so here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times 4, that's 20. That's 10. So that's about the same number of people, but you'll see that this rear projection takes up some space. And so we have to arrange the seating a different way. This projector also requires, the front one also requires a center aisle. And so there's all different types of considerations when identifying what is the best way to identify what type of projector is needed. So when we're thinking about our audiovisual equipment, we might consider using a specialist. We may not have the appropriate storage. Equipment is very expensive, and we may not have people with the appropriate knowledge in order to use the equipment and make it function the way it needs to. If the storage is not guarded appropriately, we might have some theft of our equipment, which we don't want to have. Most often, convention services managers like to use outside suppliers for our AV needs, because that way we know that the AV is going to be taken care of. I don't have to focus. That's one less thing I have to worry about. I know that somebody is going to be taking care of that. And the people that are doing it are trained. Now, I've done limited AV setups and things like that at different places where I've worked. And so I encourage you to at least get to know some basic, simple AV applications. But if you hire a specialist, then they're going to know how everything works. Sometimes hotels can have a specific in-house, and so there's, like, for example, PSAV is an AV company that is in-house, I know, at the West End, I believe they're in-house at the Wyndham Riverwalk. I think they're in-house to the convention center. And so essentially, they have people that work specifically with that hotel. They have the AV people. They have the equipment. They may or may not have storage there at the hotel. They may bring it in every time based on what they need. It can be a little bit more expensive having that using a third party to provide that, but at the same time, it allows you to feel confident that they are going to have the expertise to maintain the equipment and to operate the equipment, and the guest is going to have the best experience. So we're talking about pricing our AV services. We want to figure out kind of what our competition is charging. We don't necessarily want to match what our competition is charging, but we can kind of give us an idea. We may even throw AV in for free, and so that would be something that could be a differentiating factor of our hotel at basic AV is included. If there are different availability of outside firms to come in, we may have a contract with a specific company to be our in-house. But if there are other options, some places don't have a specific agreement, but they may, have options to consider different types of AV companies to work with based on the needs. We can also look at the number of guest rooms that are occupied by the group. So again, if we're getting a lot of revenue from them, it might make sense for us to discount our AV cost. So that way it kind of adds value to the overall experience of the group. And then we also want to kind of figure out if we have invested in the equipment, we want to make sure that we're going to identify, let's say, the equipment cost us $10,000. This is just a basic example. So if our equipment cost us $10,000 and we expect to get 100 uses out of it, then we're going to cross that out, the 100, cross out our 2 zeros, and we can charge, $100 for our AV cost, and that will, over time as we use it, that will eventually cover the cost of our AV equipment that we invested in. And so, if a group needs a projector, or if they need just a microphone, then we can have different pricing based on just what the needs of the customer and the client is. When we talk about unions, so San Antonio doesn't necessarily have unions, but some cities do. And so if you are going to do work in a hotel that does have a unionized AV company, you want to make sure that all the information about that union is conveyed to the meeting planner and is conveyed to whoever the client is. And it's really important because something that the client can do could potentially cost the hotel or cost the client through fines. If the computer or if everything needs to be plugged in and the client plugs in the projector and everything like that, then there could be repercussions based on not having someone that is part of the union that does that's their job. And so we want to make sure that our guests are following the guidelines of the unions if it is something that is part of the hotel contract. So be aware of that as you work in different places as far as what regulations are required and allowed and not allowed by the unions.